Hey, Warrior Saints, good morning and welcome to Monday's episode of the Crucifixional Life stream. Can you walk on water? We're about to find out. Let's say a quick prayer and get right after it. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, one God, amen. O heavenly King, comforter, the Spirit of truth, who art in all places and fillest all things, treasury of good things and giver of life, come and dwell in us. Cleanse us from every stain and save our souls, O gracious Lord. Amen. We're going to use today a little bit of stuff that we used yesterday and we've used before. We're going to do so because I'm really hot on it, the topic. It's an exciting and I think an important topic, and I'm just going to jump right into the text this morning. The text comes to us from Matthew chapter 14, verses 22 and following. This is the famous story you all know, whether you know the reference verses or not. It's Peter's walking on water. Or maybe even more importantly, Jesus walking on water. To set the context, so I want to talk to you what happened right before, immediately before, ending in Matthew 14, verse 21, is the culmination, the conclusion of Jesus feeding the 5,000 with 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. So it immediately ends this amazing, miraculous story. It's a miracle where he fed a gazillion people with just a little bit of food. In that story, it's a beautiful story that we'll talk about another time, but there is at least, amongst all of the other messages for us, there's at least the statement that, hey, Jesus is certainly not just a normal person. He is the divine Son of God, the one who brings God's word and feeds all of God's people. And then he says, it's the last verse in that whole part, that he sends the disciples to get in a boat and go to the other side of the lake, the other side of the sea, go on ahead of him, and he's going to dismiss the crowds. So he takes his trusted 12, like his inner circle, and he says, it's time to keep going. There's more work to be done. You get in the boat, go ahead of me, and I'll catch up. He dismisses the crowd, spends some time in prayer, and as the apostles are going to the other side of the sea, it's a funny statement in the story, because how would Jesus ever catch up? If you think about it, we have a beautiful lake here in Arizona. We don't have a lot of lakes, but we do have some lakes, and one of them is called Lake Pleasant. And Greg and I were on the lake a few months ago with his father. And maybe it was more than a few months, Greg, right? It's a couple of years ago, but we were on the lake with his father. Now, it's not the largest lake in the world, but it's big enough that if I sent Greg and his dad across, I couldn't catch up to them, right? Without my own boat, you can't. It's silliness, right? It doesn't make sense. And the story in Matthew 14 makes you kind of wonder the same thing, like, what's going on here? But nevertheless, Jesus sends his guys across the sea to continue the ministry. Now, as you read, I'm going to read through the verses a little bit, and we're going to talk about it, and we're going to explore some Old Testament today too. But listen to the verses, and I'm going to talk about a few of them because it's powerful and important in your life and my life today. Verse 22, then he made the disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side, while he dismissed the crowds. And after he had dismissed the crowds, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone. But the boat, by this time, was many furlongs distant from the land. So it was far away, and it was beaten by the waves, for the wind was against them. Now, in this statement, it's to say that the chaos of the waters was prohibitive on the boat's mission to get to the other side of the sea, right? It's the waves, it's chaos, it's wind, it's a storm. We have how many countless movies about, monster storms at sea that destroy land and homes and destroy boats and ships lost at sea. And, Tom Hanks in his, what was that? Castaway, as he's trying to get back, saved by mankind, or saved by the civilization, and he's got to fight the sea. Like, the sea is chaos. That's what it stands for. That's what it represents. It is something that is out of human control, right? And anybody who's been at sea, even been on a lake, been in a river, we know that the sea, that the waters can be chaotic. Now, as I promised, we were going to jump into a little bit of the Old Testament. So let's do that right now. We're going to go all the way back to the very beginning, Genesis chapter 1, and we're going to read a few verses in Genesis to see that the chaos of water it's kind of like the first monster that God has to fight. So listen to these words, and then we're going to come back to Matthew. In chapter 1 of Genesis, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was moving over the face of the waters. So in the beginning of the text, as God begins to create, right? It's in the beginning, he's creating. The waters are already there. They're already existing. This is not a statement for us to get lost and think that God did not create ex nihilo, but it is a metaphor for us to say that the water represents chaos. It's like we said, it's not controllable. It's something that is bigger than mankind. And so as it, at least in Genesis, as it's delivered to us, it's to say that the chaos was there. But you're going to see what God will do with this chaos. He's going to, as you know, he will restore order. He will create the heavenly shalom, right? The peace. And I don't mean the absence from war, but peace means that things are as they're supposed to be. God will define and box in the monsters. He will give them boundaries under his control. And we'll see that in the text right now. So just remember that the water in Genesis, the Spirit of God is moving across it in verse 2, just to kind of almost as if to like look around and see what needs to be done. Okay. Now, again, don't get lost. We're not reading Genesis literally where we think that somehow Father Chris is saying that God didn't create ex nihilo. Absolutely, God created from nothing. That's not the point of the story in Genesis. We know that in our theology, but in the story, it's to say that the monster, the chaos, was there. In verse 3, God said, let there be light, and then he called light and day, and so on. And then we get to verse 6. And God said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters. Now, firmament is a word, it's an ancient archaic word. It means the heavens, the skies, heaven, right? And let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters. So like all this chaotic water, he's going to put a heaven, a sky that's going to separate them. And in an ancient understanding, remember, like we know that the earth is round, the sun is the center of our galaxy. We know many more things about the universe than they did at the time. Perhaps at that time, the authors were flat earthers. I mean, they didn't understand, globe. It's not the point. The point is that he separates. He's somehow now taken control. It's almost like Moses, in that he splits the waters, which every one of you knows, get into a lake, a river, your swimming pool. You can't split the waters. And yet God has, by putting heavens in the middle, he has separated waters from water, instigating control right from the outset. And God made the firmament and separated the waters which were under the firmament from the waters that were above the firmament. And it was so, and God called the firmament heaven. Okay. Then we jump to verse 9. So now he's kind of cut him in half, and verse 9 says, and God said, let the waters under the heavens be gathered together in one place, and let the dry land appear. And it was so. And the dry land he called earth, and the water that were gathered together he called seas. So now that he's separated the waters, he's got the waters that are under, and he boxes them in, controlling them, right? Like the dry land it's a boundary. Do you understand? A boundary for the seas that he locks in. This is a powerful statement. You and I know scientifically and historically that like this is that it wasn't a magic wand type of event, that the seas, the land masses have moved. We know all of that kind of stuff over many, many countless millions of years. We understand that. But Genesis, the author is telling us something very powerful, that in spite of what may seem fearful for people because the seas are dangerous, that God is in control of them, right? That's the most powerful statement. They represent the chaos. They represent that which can consume life. And God has what's the word I'm looking for? Has shown his authority over them. God has revealed his authority. He's taken control. of the chaotic waters. All right. So that's important to us for today's story from Matthew chapter 14. And you might think, well, you might follow already where I'm going with it, but you might also wonder, like, well, why is that important? Like, I don't understand. The idea that water is the chaos. I get that, Father Chris, but what has that got to do? Well, with what we're talking about today, what's that got to do with today? Well, let's go back to chapter 14. So with that in mind, the waters of chaos, God has shown that he is the only one who is authoritative over the waters. And we return to Matthew chapter 14. And here we go. Let's read that verse again, 24. But the boat by this time was many furlongs distant from the land, beaten by the waves, for the wind was against them. Now you hear the chaos. And in the fourth watch of the night, he came to them, walking on the sea. He can't walk on water. I mean, human beings can't walk on water, right? I mean, we all know that. We all know that a human being getting into the water will sink. We're fully aware of that. So what's happening here? Yes, Jesus is the divine Son of God and can do whatever he wants. And if you want to think in terms of magic, absolutely. I mean, to be mystical about it, of course, Jesus could walk on water. He's this divine Son of God who created everything. He can do whatever. He can suspend the laws of gravity and the laws of physics. But that's not the point. And by now, I'm sure it's starting to click in your mind. What Matthew is telling us here is that Christ, because thus far, only God has been able to control the chaotic waters. Even when you talk about Moses doing it, he's doing it because God has given him the power to do that, right? No one can control the waters. Even when Joshua takes the people across the River Jordan into the promised land, Moses didn't get to go all the way in. God is effecting that. Now we see revealed to us that Jesus is controlling the waters. And he's walking across them like they're nothing, like it's dry land, right? That's good, Greg. You hear that? I mean, that's kind of cool. Like Moses crossed over like it was dry land. I mean, so we hear that in our liturgical text in the Orthodox Church. Jesus is walking on the water like it's dry land, like it's nothing. He's just coming because it's telling us that Matthew is telling us that Christ is controller, authoritative over the chaos. Do you see it? He is controlling the waters, and he's controlling them by doing something that can't be done. Do you understand that? So it's a clear declarative that this is the divine Son of God. But it's not just about magic, look at the miraculous. It's about for us, and you're going to see why that matters in just a moment. It's why it is so important to recognize that Jesus Christ is Lord over the chaos. Do you understand it? So the wind is beating against the boat and Jesus has it in his hand. And he comes to them walking. But when the disciples saw him, verse 26, they were terrified, saying, "It's a ghost." He just fed 5,000 people with 5 breads and 2 fish. Come on, man. Is anything too hard for you to believe? And they cried out with fear. But immediately he spoke to them, saying, "Take heart. Do not fear. It is I." Or in the proper sentence, "Take heart. It is I. Have no fear." So he's trying to say to them, I've conquered the great monsters. I'm walking across the chaos. Don't be afraid. It is I, the Lord. And then the test comes. And here's really the meat of the story for you and I today. And really, I think it is the ultimate meaning and message of the story. Peter answered him, "Lord, if it is you," excuse me. Peter answered, "Lord, if it is you, let me come to you on the water." Right? Let me come out there. Let me walk to you. And it's an important moment for us. And you'll see in just a moment why so. And Jesus says, "Come on. You don't trust me? Come on." Now, the funny part about it is, why in Matthew does he use Peter? I mean, there are 12 disciples, right? And most of I know we say that he's the leader of the apostles. It seems like it, but Peter gets a bad rap. But why in this particular instance does he use Peter? Not John or James or Thaddeus, right? Why Peter? So for those who know Greek, you will know that the name Peter, or Petros, it means a rock. Now, why is that important? Because if you think about it, I mean, forget human beings walking on water. What happens when you throw any rock into the water? It sinks. I mean, that's the very essence of its nature. A rock is designed in water to sink, right? And so the rock, let me verify that now that I say that. Hold on one second. Let me just, Petros. So it says, in Greek, it's funny because it uses the article, the Peter, right? O Petros. O, the Omicron is the article the word the. So it says, O Petros eben Kyrie, right? Like in other words, Lord, let me come to you. The Peter. And then it's O Petros. So he gets out and goes towards him. You would think that a rock would sink. And yet his focus is on Jesus Christ. In the midst of the chaos, the winds and the waves that are against the boat, because he's looking at Christ. He is doing the miraculous. He is doing the impossible. He is doing what is contrary to his very nature, which is to sink in the water. And he walks on the water together with Christ, moving ever towards him, right? So Peter got out of the boat and walked on the water and came to Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid. And beginning to sink, he cried out, Lord, save me. Now, it's a clear message for us, right? Like it should be very clear, and all the light bulbs should be, and the bells should be ringing in your minds right now. He saw the chaos. He took his eyes off the prize, not to sound crass, but he stopped looking at Christ and he looked at the chaos and he began to sink. And Jesus asks him, why did you doubt? Like when you were looking at me, basically is what Christ is saying. You were doing the impossible. You were doing the miraculous, right? You focused on me. It was happening. Things that weren't supposed to happen were happening. But you decided to take your eye off the prize, go back to your original essence and nature, and you sunk, right? And so that's the message for you and I today, is that this is what you got to take from Matthew 14. It's like, look, in the midst of the chaos that is our lives, the chaos that is our world, what are we focused on, right? What are we focused on? And look, we've got all kinds of chaos in our world going on, right? Like, we're still reeling over a horrible explosion in Beirut. Just to be followed up, I just found out today that in Baltimore, 3 row houses, I think it was 3, exploded. Last I heard it, they were thinking it was a gas leak. And at least 1 person died and a couple are still missing. Right? So like things are blowing up all over the place, literally blowing up. We have these crazy riots that are trying to blow up other things, police buildings and federal buildings, whether it's in Portland or Chicago. And crime is like, it's like off the hook right now. And police are being attacked and arresting hundreds and hundreds of people. It's chaotic, right? Economically, there are still, again, my numbers may be off, but you'll get the point. I think about 25 million people in our country who are without employment right now. Do you understand? Like they're because of the quarantine and all this kind of stuff. You also have to think about, like, this one gets me and really rips my guts just right out of my heart. Like, how many people are home alone, quarantined, right? Whether they be elderly or even millennial age people who have careers. They've moved out of their homes to start their own lives, and now they're locked down and having to work from home, and they are alone. Like depression on the rise. Even I understand that suicide rates in the last few months has skyrocketed because people are feeling alone and afraid. Right? And of course, there is the worst monster of the day that creates all this chaos anyways, is this COVID virus. And people are worried about, like the mask, no mask debate it's silly. It's dumb, because the real question that people are wondering is, am I going to get it? And if I do, will I die? Like, you can see, and your list could go on, and my list could go on and on. There's chaos all over the place, right? And it's causing us to feel like, as we're on the boat, I'm looking at the waves and I'm looking at the wind, and you may very well feel like you're sinking, and you may very well indeed be sinking, right? And so the message that Jesus is giving to us in Matthew 14 today is so important for us today. It is relevant. I don't care if Matthew wrote this 2,000 years ago nearly. It's relevant today, because our chaos may not be like the water and the waves on a boat, but man, it is no less real, and it is no less scary, and it is no less powerful. And so the questions that we have to answer is, am I like Peter, or am I like Peter should have been? Do I trust in the Lord, or do I take my eyes off the prize? That's the question. And to answer that question is not an easy thing, but it's perhaps the most essential question you've got to ask. And look, as we're wending our way through the chaos that is 2020, Are we focused on Christ, or are we looking to find leadership in the chaos out there, right? Like, I can promise you this, if you're looking to find a guide, a leader, somebody to show you how to live this life in that chaos, you're going to be like Petros, and you're going to sink like that rock to the bottom, right? Because that other leadership, that other guidance, that other stuff, the stuff of the world, is in a very real sense not concerned with anything but itself. Like, look, you can see this in, forgive as I speak, not politically, but about politicians. I mean, like, there's this raging debate right now about this stimulus package, how much money to give to American citizens. And they're arguing over, well, you're trying to sneak this in, and no, this is too much, and no, this is too little, and all this kind of stuff. And it's like the posturing is for a specified date in November. It's not concerned with people, like under the guise of being concerned with people. But the more you read this stuff and the more you look at it, they don't give a darn. They're not interested in people. They're interested in preserving, their own ideas. I mean, like, it is the farthest thing from being crucifixional that you could imagine. And this is why I say, like, that's what you want to be guiding you. That's what we want to be leading us. No wonder we feel the chaos. And look, I always pick on the media. And rightfully so. They are just fostering this because you get more clicks, right? More fighting makes more clicks. When things are peaceful and happy, it's kind of boring and you don't watch the news, i.e. no advertising. So they love to make it exciting and awful and he said and she said. Like, that stuff gets clicks. Clicks bring revenue from advertising, and they're a business. So, like, they're only exacerbating it. So where is this guide? I mean, who is the one it's Jesus Christ. He's the only one. And you can see it, Matthew's telling us, in the midst of the chaos, you can walk on water. So that's the challenge that's put before us. In your chaos that is 2020, in our chaos that is 2020, where are we looking? We're looking at Jesus. We're looking at the world. Like, the world's going to take you like that rock to the bottom. Jesus Christ will help you do the miraculous. And so you ask yourself, well, what is the miraculous? What are these amazing things? What is it, Father Chris, that you're telling us that we could be? And I'm telling you, just stay with Matthew. Matthew starts this most beautiful gospel. It's my favorite of all of them. He starts when he commissions us, calling us the light of the world. He's calling us to be leaders. He, Jesus, in Matthew, is calling us to be leaders. And so it's important that we are leading the charge, focusing on Christ and not the chaos of the world. That's it. And so you may say to yourself, well, what are you talking about, Father Chris? I can't lead. Yes, you can. And Jesus isn't even interested in your opinion of whether you want to lead. He is saying you are the light of the world. Not I think you should, or it would be nice if you were the light of the world. It's a strong suggestion. No. You are the light of the world. So that when people look at you, they see that's how it's supposed to be. That's a godlike man. That's a godlike woman, what we call warrior saints. People who are not self-preservative, but are crucifixional. And so being a leader in this chaotic environment is perhaps the most essential thing that any of us could do right now. So I get all the way to that point to tell you that starting, I don't even know when, probably today, we're going to launch a new series. I mean, help me, Father Chris, find what Christ is telling us about how to be the light of the world, how to lead. Absolutely. We're starting a new series. We're probably going to launch it later today, Crucifixional Leadership. That's it. It's how to lead Christ's way. How to lead crucifixionally. And in all the chaos, it's the only thing, not because it's ours, but because it is directly from God himself, imitating Christ himself. It's the only thing that's going to help you walk on the water. And I don't mean that literally, because you can go to your pools, you're going to sink. But in the chaos that is the world, the chaotic waters of 2020, you will be a light so people can say, oh, I see it. That person is, that's someone I want to follow. So visit us at warriorsaints.org for those who have not already, and become a warrior saint. To become a warrior saint and enjoy the all the benefits that go with it, it's simple. Visit warriorsaints.org and sign up for the way of the warrior saint. The promo code's probably popping on your screen. It's $30 a month. That's it. And with the promo code, it cuts 30% of it off. Like, it's less than $1 a day, right? Like, we keep saying that. You go to Starbucks every day and you buy your coffee and it's like $4. This is $1. Like, come on, people, get on the way of the warrior saint and become a warrior saint. I want you to learn how to become that crucifixional leader so that in the chaos that is 2020, people are going to look at you and say, that's somebody I want to be like. I appreciate your time. I would encourage you again, read Matthew 14. It's great. You can read Genesis 1 and then go read Matthew 14. You're going to find it's fabulous. Like the connections are unbelievable. Don't forget to visit us at warriorsaints.org. Share this all over the place. We really appreciate your help and your love, your support. People, you guys have been great is an understatement. You've been more than great, and we're thankful to you. We look forward to seeing you again tomorrow at 11 a.m. Pacific. And until then, keep walking on the way of the warrior saint.